42 years ago, almost to the day, one of these trains derailed and 54 Firebirds and Camaros landed right here. And some of them ended up being used in Knight Rider and even more in The Fall Guy. Let's find out more. "42 years ago, almost to the day, 54 Pontiac Firebirds and Chevy Camaros landed right there, in that very spot, in Selma, California, as a train bound on these tracks right here, northbound on these tracks right here, derailed at 6:50 in the morning on Thursday, November 11th, 1982. Veterans Day. Many of those Firebirds ended up being used as kit on Knight Rider, and a few of them were even used in The Fall Guy. Welcome to the Knight Rider Historians. I'm AJ, and today, do we have a story for you? Well, Knight Rider fans, if you've watched our channel for any time now, you've heard us refer to this train wreck and the Firebirds and Trans-Ams that came from it, which became kit. And you may have even read about it in articles published within the last 6 years that had nothing to do with us, but had something to do with Knight Rider. But for a time, the knowledge of the details of this train wreck had become lost. And because of that, the first part of our story will be about how we learned about this train wreck and how we hunted it down relentlessly for 15 years before we found it, and then how we released this information very slowly to the world. So let's travel back in time to these NBC Let's All Be There days. As fans of Knight Rider, back when it originally aired on NBC from 1982 to 1986, we really had very little information about the production of the show. I mean, we were fans. We're sitting on the right side, or some of us would later believe the wrong side of the television, right? We couldn't see what was going on in the production of the show. Now we wish we could. But anyway, as it turns out, as fans of the show, the first time we ever could have had any opportunity to read anything about this train wreck would have actually been in the February 1984 edition of Starlog.
I had heard about this train derailment. I knew about it for like decades, for a long time, and I never really remembered where I initially heard about it until I started doing some research and realized that it was in a 1984 Starlog article where it talks about, you know, the cars and all that stuff.
Okay. The cars and all that stuff. Let's go a little bit deeper here, because I actually didn't know that this Starlog magazine talked about the train wreck until you told me. The Starlog from February 1984. Where does it say 1984? It just says February, number 79. Now, as a kid, I had never even heard of this magazine at all. It wasn't on my radar. It wasn't the kind of thing where it would have been on the newsstands and the stores that I went into as a kid. So I wasn't aware that this magazine even existed until the late 90s, when I started researching Knight Rider on the internet. And even then, I don't think I picked up on the fact that there was this article here on... Look at that. Isn't that a beautiful picture? Did Bill Cotter take the picture? Have we ever spoken with him? That's another story. Anyway, a lot of great information, and I think some more insider information was presented to fans by the author of this particular article than had ever been in any other publication. Certainly more than the Dynamite magazine that we would have gotten as kids, or the Knight Rider album by Chip Lovett, both of which I could have ordered from my weekly reader at school, and were written for kids. But this was a little bit more adult, maybe later teenager who was into sci-fi. Never saw it. But here it is. We find it on page 21, right next to this fantastic reprint of the Kit Kit.
On Sunday, October 2nd, Kit and I face our greatest challenge in a spectacular 2-hour movie. We're hoping we can win with the secrets found in this Kit Kit. To get your free copy, send a self-addressed stamped envelope to Kit Kit, Box 80, Hollywood. Get your Kit Kit and be there.
And here it is right here. Buying and then destroying expensive items such as cars. It's part of this section right here on page 20. Kit, an exclusive look inside. I like this. Surprisingly, Kit is protected by a security screen which could serve as a model for the Pentagon. Usually requests for any information are immediately denied. A press spokesperson for Universal Studios explains that the producers feel that David's the star and the car is only a prop. Besides, why tell the competition everything? Bernadette Joyce. We've interviewed Bernadette Joyce. Knight Rider's assistant producer has a slightly different, more pragmatic viewpoint. If we were to state everything that Kit can and can't do, it would severely limit what the writers could do in the future episodes. And also, if we labeled every switch with a function, you can bet some fan would notice if we changed anything. Well, guess what? We're the fans that notice when you change anything, and we notice all the time. Now, we did even notice back then as kids, some of us. I certainly did. But anyway, if all of this information comes from her, then I guess we could say that Bernadette Joyce is the first person to tell fans about the train wreck that we're talking about here. Now, I don't know why Bernadette would say that the original kit was built by George Barris, which is misprinted here as Chuck, the famous car designer responsible for many classic TV and movie autos. Maybe she didn't know about Michael Shae. I mean, she's a producer on the show. I'm sure George is, George is self-promoting himself, as he always has. And so she's probably aware of George and not aware of Michael, because Michael was involved before the pilot promo was ever filmed. And then he just quietly went away into the background. And because he had done his job, he designed Kit and delivered it to Glen. And what Glen did with it from there was out of his control. And so he never showed up on the set. We asked him that. So I can understand why Bernadette, if information is from her, really believed that George was the one that created Kit, that originally built Kit. Because, knowing George, he said that from day one as soon as he started showing up on the set. And, of course, we have Ron Martinez to blame for bringing him in, but that's another story entirely. So this is fantastic. She says, actually, an average of 9 kits exist at any one time, with the modifications now done by Universal. Only one of these vehicles is the picture car. We call it the hero car. It has Kit's intricate dashboard and controls. And since many of the show's stunts result in total demolition of the other car involved, the picture car is never used in any sequence other than those shots in which Michael Knight jumps into or out of the car, or in interior scenes of David Hasselhoff driving. A duplicate of this dash, built in segments for easy filming, sits on a Universal soundstage. We would love to cover that. It's used for insert shots, which shows various flashing lights, TV monitors, and the voice display box. Although he doesn't receive screen credit, Kit's voice is supplied by veteran actor William Daniels, who also stars in NBC's Say It Elsewhere. Back to the cars, though. Buying and then destroying, this is what we're really after. Buying and then destroying expensive items such as cars places a strain on even studio budgets. Luckily, Knight Rider was able to take advantage of Pontiac's unfortunate experience when a trainload of new Trans Ams derailed, damaging most of the cars. Universal now employs those vehicles as stunt cars, using special body sections molded to transform them into kits. And goes on to say here are the specifications of kits. They're definitely not options you'll find on your average showroom floor. All right, anyway. This is it. So maybe it's Bernadette Joyce who was the first person who leaked it in a way that us as fans could hear about that. Now, in 1984, in February of 1984, I was in 6th grade. I was 12 years old, and so never saw this magazine. I would have loved to, and I'm certain that had I read this back then, I would have remembered it. But as fans, this is the first time that we ever hear about the now infamous train wreck that provided Firebirds and Trans Ams to Universal Studios for use as kit. But as a kid, I never saw that Starlog article. I don't know when Joe saw it, but I didn't see it back then. The first time that I ever heard about the train wreck was an interview that we had the privilege of conducting over the phone with Glen Larson. This was in February 21st of 2002 to be exact. And let's listen to what Glen has to say about the train wreck. Here we go.
Now, is it true that whenever you made the deal with Pontiac, that part of the condition was that all the cars would be crushed once the series was done, destroyed?
No, that's. I think that's a mischaracterization of something else that happened.
Oh, do tell us.
Or a mistake in the sense that the story has been mistold from what really happened. What happened was they gave us those cars. There were no conditions attached that I know of.
Okay.
What happened was a trainload of cars. I mean, something like 32 cars. Could have been slightly less, but I think it's something like that, was involved in an accident.
Mm-hmm.
And now a couple of cars got bent and nicked up a little bit, but most of them were in pristine condition, Bristol shape, no problems whatsoever. However, there's a law that if a car has been in an accident, you can't sell it as new or put it on the road, because I mean you really don't know what might be wrong with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean it's a general insurance thing that I guess General Motors had, and what they said was, you know, these cars are in too good a shape to just crush, and they, knowing that we were using these things, and they were probably donating them to us, at least at that point, or at the early stages, they offered them to me. They called me in at Fox and told me we could have these cars under the condition that they could never be licensed for use on the road, and that when we were done with them, they would have to be crushed. And by the way, you know, that came at a point when I don't know that came in the first 13. I mean, I was still involved in certain things of a generic level, but, you know, again, not in the day-to-day operation.
Mm-hmm.
This is new information for us. So from everyone that we interviewed for our first book, Knight Rider Legacy, which is what we were doing at the time when we were having this interview with Glen, Glen was the first person to tell us this, which makes sense because we really didn't get a lot of producers in that first version of the book. We didn't interview a lot of the producers. The producers would have known and probably would have brought that up. But so Glen was the first person who was close enough to the process that we ever interviewed back in those early 2000s days to actually tell us about the train wreck. And from that point on, I think Joe and I decided we had to figure out more about that train wreck, particularly once we really started getting into, and I think by this time once we really started getting into hunting down, realizing first of all that original cars from the show had survived, and hunting down all of those, and then figuring out, doing the natural progression for us, which was figuring out all of the cars used as kit in Knight Rider. How many were actually used, exactly, and which ones they were. So the hunt was on to find this train wreck. So as far as I know, the next publication that the public could have read that talks about the train wreck wasn't until 2005 when this guy, a guy by the name of David Newhart, or New Harded. I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name. David, if you're watching, I'm sorry. Very, very sorry. But anyway, he publishes this fantastic book called Muscle Car Color History Firebird Trans Am in 2005. Yeah, right there, we see the copyright 2005, published by Motor Books. And if we jump forward to pages 74 and 75, we actually see an article talking a little bit about the origin of the cars. And I think it's pretty obvious that he's actually interviewing friends of ours from the Vista Group. You've definitely heard us talk about the Vista Group before. This was actually a fantastic thing for us to read, even in 2005, because at the time this came out, we had not yet had the opportunity to meet anyone from the Vista Group. So this kind of it wasn't new information to us at the time for the most part. But it was information from a different perspective from somebody who was closer to the part of this process than just about anybody we've spoken with before. And I'm going to say just about. This is the section I want to focus on. I've confirmed that this is actually Chuck Koch with the Vista Group, the vice president of the Vista Group, and maybe even co-founder of the Vista Group, who actually says within a short period after filming started, the two stunt cars were in a bad way. And if you followed our channel, you certainly know which cars those were. This is, I mean, what Chuck's saying here is right on, even though we haven't talked to him in person and compared notes. The two stunt cars that they had were in a bad way. They were held together with baling wire and gaffer's tape. And so Chuck says Universal went to Pontiac asking for more cars, but the automaker told the studio that the original 4 cars were all the studio was going to get. And so, as fate would have it, Chuck Koch, who's actually the person telling this story, got wind of a train derailment between the Van Nuys plant and the Arizona border. Now that's a detail that we haven't heard yet. Anyway, it goes on to say, and 2 train cars full of Trans Ams landed on their sides. And Chuck Koch recalls, a lot of the cars were damaged, and they were going to be shipped back to the Van Nuys plant to be reconditioned if possible. Well, that story's changed a bit over the years, but we'll get to that. So after talking with all sorts of Pontiac people, Chuck says he got the permission. Chuck says, I got the permission for Harker, Wade, and myself to look at them when they got back to the coast, right? Assuming that by that he means the Van Nuys plant. He says this was not the kind of thing Pontiac wanted to get out. Harker walked past the 2 rows of vehicles determining which cars could be repaired enough to use in the show, and he ended up with a dozen. Exactly. These Trans Ams ended up being used for the show's entire 4-year run, and the rest is history. What made more sense was to get more information about the train wreck from people who were there. So now that we know about this train wreck, from that point forward, every single person that we talked to who worked on Knight Rider, who had anything to do with the cars, right, anything at all, we asked the question about the train wreck. We asked Ron Martinez. Right? He was there the whole time because he was the first unit supervisor for the entire show, from pilot to the very end. And of course we asked Jack Gill and Bob Brawver and the guys who were in the Universal Transportation Department back then. We asked everyone possible who ever touched the cars if they could remember when the train wreck was, when the cars arrived specifically. And even for which season, right? Did they show up in first season, second season, third season? When did these things show up? And a few people had, some people had better memories than others, but they all, when I really pressed them and they didn't get too annoyed with me, they vaguely remembered that it was early in the series, but they couldn't say definitely that it was during the first season or second season. And of course others just couldn't remember it at all. They just said, yeah, we got a bunch of cars, but I couldn't tell you when. What was really interesting about the things that they did tell us, though, were some fantastic details. Like a number of people there actually said, we stripped them all down and we used them all for parts. We didn't use any cars in the show.
So fast forward to 2011, AJ and I went and met the folks at the Vista Group, a product placement company that was responsible for supplying movies and TV shows with vehicles. And they arranged to get the first 3 Trans Ams to Knight Rider. They arranged for the GMC General to be on the show, stuff like that. So we met with them, and the topic of this train derailment came up. And those guys didn't remember the details specifically. They thought maybe it happened in Arizona, but they did remember it did happen because they were involved after the accident. They were kind of a liaison between General Motors and Knight Rider to get the car secured. So, so they kind of validated what I had read a long time ago in Starlog.
And the cars that were in the train wreck, and were damaged that way, they were all non-saleable cars with no VIN numbers, and had to be scrapped. Right. And were scrapped as far as we know.
So, of course, I specifically asked Eric if he could remember anything about when and where this train wreck happened. And here's his response.
Well, I don't. I might have known at one time. What happened was, the original cars were getting banged up and fixed up and banged up and fixed up, and so we were constantly getting, can't we get another, non-saleable car, something that's been used in testing or something? We need more cars. And then the Pontiac organization was aware of that, and then one day we got a call that said, hey, look, a train, it wasn't actually a train wreck per se. As I remember this, I think the cars that were loaded on the train hit an overpass or something. And I don't think that they went off the track, but I don't remember exactly that detail. But there was a number of cars that were damaged and could not be sold, and so they said they were going to make them available to the show, but they had to be crushed at the end.
Sure.
So that's and Chuck here in the office may have a better handle, on the exact train thing. I don't remember how many they got, 12, 14 of them, whatever it was. And, my first question was, they do this shipping all the time. How could they have a problem with it? Maybe that's not the right question to ask.
Where the train wreck happened, they did not care. What was really important to them is that they got these extra cars that they desperately needed for production of Knight Rider. That's what was really, really important. So Glenn says he was there. Eric says he was there. Eric says Chuck was there. They all say Harker was there. So the people to talk to are the people who were closest to this, right? And that would have been Eric Dahlquist, Chuck Koch, Harker Wade, and of course Glenn. Now Glenn says they called him. I think what that probably means is the Vista Group guys called Glenn. Gosh, when was that interview? That was 22 years ago that we interviewed Glenn. It's actually before he recorded any interviews that are now on YouTube for him talking about the creation of Knight Rider. So we spent all of this time searching in Arizona. Now, newspapers.com was just in its infancy around this time, right? And I don't actually remember when newspapers.com became a thing. But, we became aware of them early on and, started using them as soon as we became aware of newspapers.com for train wreck research primarily. Because we thought, well, if there's a train wreck, then, somebody's going to write a newspaper article about it somewhere. Now, what made us think that, maybe we'd never find it in newspapers.com or anywhere else is that we hear Eric saying it really wasn't a train wreck. The car hit an overpass or something. One of the train cars hit an overpass. It was, it makes it sound like it was a minor incident, so minor that it might not have been newsworthy. All right, so we're searching for train wrecks, in Arizona, and we'd search for a while and find nothing, and search for a while and find nothing, and really, I think at this point we're really believing that someone who worked with the show is going to come up with some new piece of information. We're going to talk to somebody we haven't talked to yet who actually knows. Something happened. As time goes on here and this train wreck remains this burning mystery with the Knight Rider historians. Burning mystery. And the founder of the Vista Group, Eric Dahlquist, passes away on Christmas Eve 2016 at age 79. Eric and Chuck, and Eric in particular, tried really hard and really put a lot of effort into trying to help us do this research. And we're really glad that he did. I mean, it's understandable because we are actually preserving the real story of the work that he and his firm were key in doing back then. They were key in making happen. The kit might not have existed, or if he did exist, he wouldn't have been a Trans Am, I don't think, without the efforts of Eric and Chuck and the Vista Group. I don't think that would have happened. You know, see our video on could Kit have become a Datsun 380Z? Maybe, except all of our replicas would be Datsuns instead of Pontiacs. You know, 82 Datsuns. What was the 82 Datsun Z car? The Datsun 280Z car, right. Not 380, but 280Z. Yeah, this could have been Kit, the Datsun 280Z. Not as cool looking. So Eric was, I mean, you know, here he is, one of the founders of the Vista Group. And so this was a loss. I know I was talking about, I don't know how I got off the topic, but I was talking about, you know, Eric really went out of his way to help us, right? He spent a lot of time, he got to know us, you know, and we began to really, you know, call him a friend. And, you know, and it makes, and so he was really glad that we were working so hard to find all these obscure details about the work and recognize the work that the Vista Group and the role that the Vista Group had played in procuring the Trans Ams for Kit as Knight Rider. You know, both the original cars, 3/4, and we'll call it 3/4, as well as the train wreck cars. This is where things begin to take a turn. Eric passes away. Eric passes away on Christmas Eve of 2016, and Chuck sends me an email, I think, right after Christmas, and tells me about this. He says, it's my sad duty to tell you that our friend Eric has passed away. So we were quite sad about this, but I think Joe's going to tell this story. I don't know if he's going to say this part, but I think this lit a bit of a, you know, a fire under Joe and I had already been doing some work with the VIN numbers, trying to find the train wreck. And then, you know, in the middle of this, Eric passes away. And I think, you know, over the holiday season particularly, I think Joe looked pretty hard.
In late 2016, early 2017, I decided to just kind of look for see if I could find any evidence of a train derailment that happened on the west coast of the United States that involved cars. So the first thing I did is AJ and I had a subscription to newspapers.com, which is amazing. If you guys have never been there, there's thousands and thousands of newspapers you can search by, and it's really neat. Anyways, so I had searched before for the train derailment stuff, but never found anything. But between the time I had searched for it originally and late 2016, early 2017, a number of additional newspapers became available on newspapers.com, to including ones that were published in the Fresno, California area. So I did my normal searches. I was like, train derailment, General Motors, Pontiac, Firebird, you know, all that stuff. And finally, it was on January 10th of 2017, one of my searches, there was a hit. And it was from one of those Fresno area newspapers. And the title was something like, Softened Railbed Leads to Train Derailment, something along those lines. So I read it. It was just a short article, a couple paragraphs, but it talked about this accident, the train going over this railbed that had been softened because it had rained a lot the night before. Cars toppled over. And in like the third or fourth paragraph, it said the cars contained 54 brand new, 54 General Motors cars, something along those lines. And I thought, boy, that might be it. And I looked to see where this was, where this happened. It was Selma, California, which is just a couple hours north of Los Angeles. And the timing was right, November 11th, 1982, which was, you know, smack dab in the middle of filming for the first season. And we know by watching the show that some of those train wreck cars started appearing late in the first season. So the timing all kind of worked out, the details worked out, the location worked out. So I sent it to AJ and I said, I think I found it. And then from there, AJ did, what AJ does.
I get this email from Joe. Where is it? January 10th, 2017 at 6:40 a.m. because he does his best work at 30 in the morning. That's Joe. And the subject is Thursday, November 11th, 1982, the train wreck. And this is the first time I've seen that date associated with the train wreck. And Joe says, could this be it? It's in California, not Arizona, and a rain-softened railbed, not an overpass, caused the accident. So you see, we're looking at some differences here. And so this is the I'm skeptical sentence, but here's the but. But it specifically says that it carried 18 General Motors vehicles that will be shipped back to be scrapped. Let's read the article, shall we? It says, rain-softened railbed blamed for derailment of freight train. A rain-soaked railroad bed was blamed for the trail derailment that closed the Southern Pacific Line Thursday through the San Joaquin Valley and wrecked 54 new cars being shipped to dealers. No one was hurt when up to 17 cars on a 49-car northbound freight derailed at Selma, 200 miles north of Los Angeles, just before 7 a.m. Okay, Lloyd Nations, we'll get to him later, talks about the damage of this. And Lloyd Nations was the San Joaquin District Superintendent for Southern Pacific, of course, the railroad, right? So that's him. So he said that 3 of the derailed freight cars carried 18 new General Motors cars that will be shipped back to be scrapped. Okay, fine. 18 new General Motors cars. This, and we're actually looking at 2 numbers here. We've got 54 new cars and 18 new General Motors cars. So what are they? Are they Oldsmobile? Are they Chevy? Are they Buick? Are they Pontiac? And if they are Pontiac, are they Bonnevilles? Or are they Firebirds? This is all we could find on newspapers.com. We couldn't find any more. I think we found 2 more that said this exact thing or a little bit less than that. This sounds like a major train wreck. 17 cars. Now that's not automobile cars on the road. That's rail cars. Train cars, rail cars, right? So we've got this is where the terminology gets a little bit confusing because we have cars carrying cars. We've got train cars carrying, passenger cars. And of course now we've got a hot lead. We have got to know. Now our most important thing is, what cars are these? That is a big train wreck. There's got to be a newspaper somewhere that's got pictures. Somebody took pictures, and if there's one place that took pictures, if there's one newspaper that took pictures, it's the newspaper in Selma. So does Selma have a newspaper? The Selma Enterprise is a newspaper there. Here's their wiki article. Founded 1888, they didn't close down, which means they're still running. Right, but on newspapers.com, we don't have the Selma Enterprise. We can't find it. Selma Enterprise doesn't have it. Now where are you going to go? Why did it take me almost 2 months to think about that? The library, of course, the library. Why did it take me so long to figure that out? The library, of course, the library. So I got to call the library, and sure enough, they have Saturday hours, right? So it's Saturday late morning, maybe noon. They don't close till 2 p.m. So I call, and I get a hold of a very, very lovely librarian by the name of Carolyn Espino. Do you have newspaper archives in your library that go back that far? And she said, yes, in our reference section, we absolutely should have those. And so I explained to her what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a train wreck. I'm looking for pictures in the newspaper of a train wreck that would have happened November 11th. And I'm explaining to her this to her over the phone. And she said, well, give me a couple hours and give me an email address. And if I find anything, I'll email you. On Saturday, March 4th, which is just a few hours after I called her, right? I might at 2 p.m. Pacific time. The Selma Enterprise newspaper is a weekly newspaper. They're published once a week on Thursdays. Well, guess what day November, the train wreck happened? So that the paper is published on a Thursday. So in order to get news from the train wreck in this paper, the paper was published the morning of the train wreck, which means this train wreck is not going to be in the paper on the day of the train wreck, or not even the next day. Instead, readers have to wait until the following Thursday, the 18th, in order to get that information. But I said all that to say, look at this. Mr. Palmgren, attached is the article that was in the local newspaper. It was taken from the Selma Enterprise, dated Thursday, November 18th, 1982, which is a full week later. This is the best copy we could get. Unfortunately, it did cut off a couple of letters on some words. If you have any further questions, let me know. And she has this attachment. Great. So my heart's beating kind of fast here. And I open this up, and it's sideways. But I scroll through this, and then I see that. And I don't even have to download this and rotate it. I instantly recognize what this is, and so do you. Finally now, March 4th, it's confirmed, we, the Knight Rider historians, have actually figured out where this train wreck was, when it happened, where it happened, and now we have some details. So for the first time in what, our 15-year search? Because it was 15 years. We started searching in 2002 when Glen Larson told us about this. For the first time in our 15-year search, we now have answers. This was huge. An idea popped into my head once we got this far is, all right, I don't need to go there. I just need really, really good photographs of this paper. Well, there's photographers in Selma, California, isn't there? I mean, they're probably wedding photographers, but you know, but you can pay them to take pictures. So I started searching for Selma photographers, Selma, California, because otherwise I get Selma, Alabama, right? I find Nakamichi Photography, and I say, great. Let's go to their website. I think, of course, I'm doing most of this research at night because I do. And I go to their website, Nakamichi Photography. They're a local company, never heard of them. They're not a major chain, which means they're probably open to doing something a little bit unusual. And, you know, going to a library and taking pictures of a newspaper is probably a job that they've never been hired to do before. I called it a unique small photo job request. Look at that. But anyway, so it was March 9th then, 5 days later, that he said, here are the articles from the pictures of November 11th, 1982, and a week later on November 25th. So he found more information while he was there. He said a week later on November 25th, a few more pictures were published, and I looked through the articles published a few months after that and didn't see any more. Okay, all right, well, I want to see these. I want to see these pictures. And so for the first time now, we actually are going to see high-resolution images of this. And that is awesome. Now, by this time, because of the dates, and I had already done so much work with the Van Nuys plant, I knew for sure that these were 19. Even with the bad copy that we got from Carolyn, how many train wrecks could have actually happened around that time that just happened to have 1983 Firebirds and Transams? It's at the perfect time. This actually fits as closely as possible with what everybody had said, except for the fact that it wasn't in Arizona, the train was not headed towards Arizona, and it didn't hit an overpass. Contrary to what we were being told where, well, it wasn't really a train wreck. Oh yeah, baby, this was a train wreck, and it was a real train wreck. To quote Chuck, he said, some guy in Detroit said that they were in Arizona. That's all I knew. And it was, he didn't, we're the first ones to like dig this deep to try to uncover this. Now, 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to interview Chuck Koch, Vice President of the Vista Group, and Harker Wade. And we've heard a lot about both of them so far. So let's hear the rest of this in their words, or at least Chuck's.
I can't recall who called me, but I got a call from somebody at Pontiac about this train wreck of Camaros and Firebirds from the Van Nuys plant, and they thought maybe it would be of use for a Knight Rider, and I have no idea who that was. It might have even been the guy it might have been the guy I worked with at GMC Truck, because we were obviously heavily involved with product placement with them, and he would have been aware of Knight Rider, because he and I talked all the time about stuff like that. But somebody called me about this train derailment that had damaged many F-cars, Firebirds. That set me to doing some research, and this is really it's foggy. I talked with somebody at PMT, and they said, yeah, there was a train derailment. Oh, the guy also said that it was in Arizona, which you proved that was wrong. It was actually in California, in Selma, beautiful downtown Selma. And probably, I mean, you got a guy back in Detroit, he doesn't know.
Exactly.
So, anyway, because I always thought it was Arizona. Anyway, so they got these cars back to the PMT lot. And of course, because they were on a train, they were still a property of PMT, and legally. So, when I found out, when they were there, and I had already talked with the Pontiac people and with PMT, and that they had said, yeah, we could probably, some we can repair, some we can't repair. So those that we can't repair, we're going to scrap them. So, yeah, we could probably make those available for the show. So I said, great. So Harker and I went over one afternoon or one day to the PMT lot, and there were these carriers with the damaged cars on them, and we picked 12 or so that were too damaged to be repaired for sale, but they were fine for stunt use and like that. So those, we wrote down the VIN numbers and gave them to PMT, and they showed up at Universal at some point without. I think they removed the VIN. They had to remove it because they were officially scrapped when they went. Correct. So I doubt that PMT would have taken them over there.
No.
Yeah. Well, PMT lot is the Van Nuys lot, because I mean, as I say, you had the assembly plant, and then the parking lot right outside the assembly plant. And that was a PMT lot, because once the cars left the plant, they were the property of PMT.
And that was like a half mile away.
No, it was right. It was. They were on a car transporter.
No,
yeah.
Look through them and tell me which one actually looks closest to what you saw them on. Because I've all.
Well, they weren't. Yeah, they weren't. Well, they were. If I recall, they were double stacked, so they weren't like this. They weren't triple stacked.
Okay, they were double stacked.
Good point.
Right.
Good point.
That might be closer.
Okay, but see that's.
Remember now.
They were on they weren't on the essay.
They were
on the.
Were they on? Okay.
Yep.
All right. So all right.
Cool.
All right. I was looking at cars, not trailers.
I agree with you. I remember a double stack.
I didn't care about trailers. I mean, I do recall them being
Actually,
just a double stack.
that.
So it could have been something like that then.
That's it. All the minutiae is coming together today. Gentlemen, thank you. Anyway, we got these fantastic pictures from Glen Nakamichi, right? And then he gives us new pictures that were not in the original article, and our tongues are hanging out. I'm like, oh my gosh, look at this. Look at this. By now, in the following week, evidently there was enough time for the cleanup crew to tip these things up. They tipped them up, and if you look here, there's this incredibly steep, God, we don't know if this is a ladder or if this is how they're getting the cars out. It's probably a ladder, we hope, because, to take them out that steep, that's going to be a problem, but, oh my God, yeah. But they must have been doing something, because look, the cars are gone from this one. You can see all the way through it. Well, I don't know. We don't know how they got the cars out, but anyway, we saw this in the first one. But look at this, right? He gives us this golden money shot. Now, tell me, Damien, are those 14s or 15s? Were 15s available in 83? Yep, these are 83s. I told Glenn Nakamichi this when I said, you know, when we talked over the phone to do this photo job, I said, take as many pictures as you dare and take the highest resolution possible. I want to be able to see the pixels in the picture, in the pictures printed in that newspaper, and he certainly did it. Look at that. He did that. So we can't, because this is a picture printed in the newspaper, we can't quite see what's there. But anyway, this is more information than we've had. Fortunately, it's black and white. But of course, we know these are 83, so we know we're not going to find PMD seats here. We're going to find the 83 headrest seats. Glenn was absolutely fantastic. I remember, I think he called me. I didn't say this in any of the emails, or maybe he did. But he basically said, I had to show up first to the library before I brought my camera equipment just to make sure that this was for real. You know, and I think I called the library and I said, is it okay if I hire a photographer to come in there during library hours and take pictures of this newspaper? Invoice. AJ, thanks for calling on me to do this work for you. I hope it's satisfactory. Attached is the statement for the job. Your personal check is fine. Look what he charged me. I felt like this was a bargain. Selma Enterprise, 18 and 25, very specific, $100. Oh yeah, he got paid. On March 4th of 17, when when I got that email from Carolyn Espino with that attachment, of course, the first thing I did was I hit the forward button. And I sent him this email, Saturday, March 4th, 4:53 p.m. This is exactly the right one. Nice work, Joe.
And then from there, AJ did, you know, what AJ does, and he reached out to the Selma Public Library, and before we knew it, we had scans of newspapers that showed pictures of 1983 Firebirds and Camaros dented on their side, everything, and we're like, this is definitely the train derailment we've been searching for.
Well, anyway, here's Joe's reaction. So minutes later, I think it was that minute, right? So 5:18. Oh no, he waited like at least half an hour to answer me, so he didn't see it immediately. But he said, "Wow, to see that picture of a Trans Am, knowing it was probably going to be Kit, gives me the chills. I can't believe we finally have some answers to this mystery." Oh, and the photographer appears to be David Lasson. Here he is on LinkedIn. Let's see if he still has the original photos and negatives in his archive. I want to see all those cars. Did we track down David Lasson? Yes, Trains Magazine isn't that interesting. Of course, I immediately contacted David Lasson on LinkedIn, to which he suggested I reach out to him on email. And so I did so here. Nice, thorough email. To which he replies, "Hi, AJ and Joe. Total coincidence that I was in Selma then and at Trains now. For most of the intervening 30-plus years, it was a sports writer in Southern California, but the increasingly rapid erosion of the newspaper industry made getting out a good idea, and evidently he was at Trains now for the next 2.5 years. Yes, I reached out to David, for this follow-up video, but I couldn't get a hold of him yet. But I'm definitely going to be sending him a link to this video. Hopefully he's at least going to be able to see that, because we're going to give him, a little shout out and include this communication in there, because we want our fans. We want our fans to know how thorough we are as the Knight Rider historians. You think maybe they already know already, but we do not want to disappoint. We want what I don't want to see in the comments is, did you think of this? And did you call these people? And I don't want to see that in the comments unless we really didn't do it. So that's really why I want to go through all the stones, or at least a good number of the stones that we unturned as part of this, unturned as part of this process. So now this was a really interesting thing. I asked him if he saved any. He says, "Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to help you much. I don't have the original negatives. They would have remained with the Selma Enterprise." And of course, we already contacted them and they said, "No, we don't have anything from that old." But I know they've changed hands then, and who knows if they still have them on file. They don't. Right? Even then, I doubt they'd include what you're looking for. Not surprisingly, the authorities weren't letting us too near the derailment, and we certainly didn't see any kind of documentation of what was on the train. railroads are very proprietary about that sort of thing. Of course they are. Yeah, because I said, did you happen to get any VINs on the cars? Of course I asked him that. Now, but here's an interesting thing. One of the things I can tell you is that I'm pretty sure at least one or two of the cars from the derailment ended up at Selma High School for the shop class to work on, and I suspect the paper had a story about it when it happened. You think we looked for that story? We looked, but we didn't find anything. So, would you believe that I found the yearbook online and even downloaded that and tried to contact some high school students and faculty? Yeah, well, I didn't find anything. But if any of you watching this video, if you know anything about, one of those 83 Firebirds or Camaros showing up in your shop, in your automotive shop in Selma or anywhere else for that matter, please email us at knightriderhistorians@gmail.com. We want to know this. That's a very, very important thing for us to know. Somebody from this yearbook might actually, still be around, might be watching this video, and might know if one of those cars did show up at your shop, because, even if we can't get any additional information about the cars, it would be really, really great to confirm the story. Or if any of you were there and you know for sure that one of those 83 Firebirds or Camaros never showed up in your automotive shop, I'd like to know that too. So if you were there and you do know, please email us at knightriderhistorians@gmail.com. So this is a good point to point out that at this point, I thought the best thing that we could do is actually get more pictures of this train wreck that are in color. We created a Facebook group for this train wreck. Let's find it. Selma train accident. That's the first hit. The first hit. This is a Facebook group that we created, when we first found this, and I guarantee you we're going to be publishing a link to this video on this Facebook group. But every so often, and certainly every anniversary of the train wreck up until the last few years, because we just got busy. But every anniversary for the first several years, I'd publish a little nugget article, and we'd even get Facebook to promote it to a demographic that we thought would actually have been people in Selma. And so, I published things like this, asking for photographs. Right? Did anyone take pictures of these Camaros and Firebirds as the wreckage was being sorted through? If so, please let me know. What are your stories about seeing these automobiles in the wreckage? And some people by this time had already provided some. I named them right here. And we even used some of those pictures for reference. What's really cool about this is 4 years later in 2021, this Facebook page gets the attention. I think it's because there was an article published in a newspaper that Chuck did. Right, there was a car I think Scott Oldham created a newspaper page where this wreckage was talked about. The cars used for Knight Rider were talked about. And by this time, of course, we had informed Chuck that that the train wreck actually happened in Selma, California. And so from the time that we informed him of this in March of 2017, from that point forward, anytime he did new articles on the train wreck, right? Anytime he told that story to a reporter who was writing an article for Hot Rod Magazine, online, or whatever it was, or Haggerty. These are in Haggerty. He actually references that it's in Selma, California. I think a train enthusiast saw that article and said, "Hey, I took pictures of this wreck, did a little research, found our Facebook group. Not sure if that was it or not. Yeah, it is. Found our Facebook group, posted on our Facebook group that he 2 days after the wreck showed up to take pictures." And he posted those pictures on the Facebook group. So the Facebook group was really serving its purpose, because years later, it's still finding photos of the train wreck on the ground. Here's a rail. And this was the money shot that he took right there. Because for the first, we can now see color. Yeah, so he sent us a nice high resolution shot of this. And so we can clearly see, because he did, what's beautiful about this is Ken Retain is a professional. He's as serious about trains as we are as about Knight Rider, and was his entire life. So by the time the Selma train wreck happened, I think he said he was 33 at the time. So he heard about the train wreck because he's part of a train enthusiast community even back then. Hears about the train wreck, travels specifically to Selma with his camera to take pictures of the train wreck because this is his hobby. Taking pictures of trains is his hobby. And I'm sure he's a professional photographer too. So he took these color photographs. We can clearly see what we suspected, confirm what we suspected. This Trans Am here is clearly white, and it is a Trans Am, not a Firebird SE, we think. I mean, okay, it could be an SE, but anyway, we can clearly see that this is one of the colors of blue. I'll tell you which one. You probably can tell me. There's a light blue and a dark blue. This is light royal blue, and so we can clearly also see that it's a Firebird. Because why? No smoke. So that's a Firebird, and can you tell what this one is? It should be real easy because that's the bumper. What's not on the bumper?
Yeah, it's going to be a Camaro.
Right, because we don't have the license plate cutout. Instead, you can't see it very well over Zoom, but it's right here. There's your license plate, which is, where the Camaro puts them. So it's the same color. Okay, but it's a Camaro, not a Firebird. So we're looking at 2 Firebirds here and 1 Camaro. So anything that we can get is going to be very helpful because in order to figure out which car is which and go back to the records that we've culled and worked on, and we don't even have time to get into that tonight, the color of the car matters. Since we launched our YouTube channel, in a lot of our videos, we refer to this train wreck. Here's a few of them right here. But now you know the rest of the story. No, I'm not Paul Harvey. Just another shout out. The Selma Enterprise says hundreds of Selmans spent hours over the last week taking pictures and gawking. If any of you watching this has any photos that you took photos then, and you can find them now, please email us at knightriderhistorians@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Please email us. Unfortunately for this video, we are out of time. But don't we all want to know exactly which Firebirds and Camaros came from that train wreck and what happened to them? Whether they were used in Knight Rider, the Fall Guy, some high school's automotive shop, some college's automotive shop. We'll get to that. The story is to be continued because what you see here is another part of the story that we didn't see until years later. But that is going to have to wait for part 2 of the Knight Rider train wreck of Selma, California, November 11th, 1982. As you're going to find out in our next video, it's actually a fairly costly endeavor to continue the research that we've done, and you'll see why. I mentioned earlier in this video that the months preceding the point at which Joe found the article that led us to the train wreck, I was doing VIN research. And that VIN research is ongoing, and that's part of what's very expensive. But now you can be a bigger part of the story if you want to, because as of the release of this video, we just launched a new Patreon support level tier called the Train Wreck Researcher. All of the support that we get from this tier will go to what we're calling the Knight Rider Selma Train Wreck Firebird and Camaro research. So all of you who commit to that Patreon support level, you get to directly help us with this VIN research. Train Wreck Researcher, new tier on Patreon, if you'd like to support our work. And if you're already doing so, if you're already a Patreon supporter, thank you very much. All right, that was fun. You heard me say at the beginning of this video that this train wreck happened on Veterans Day, November 11th, 1982. And as of the day we're releasing this video, not only is it the 42nd anniversary of this train wreck, but it is also, again, Veterans Day. And therefore, every time that we focus on this train wreck, some part of me and some part of us remember that this happened on Veterans Day. So I would be remiss if I didn't take an opportunity to thank you, all veterans, anyone who served in any capacity to serve our country. Thank you. Today, we honor you for your service.
friends, it's me, Kit. When I'm not out fighting crime, I like to follow my friends at knightriderhistorians.com. Check it out.